I'm Shaun Haney, and this is RealAg on the Weekend. Let's get real and get connected with the week that was in Canadian agriculture. RealAg on the Weekend starts now. Welcome to RealAg on the Weekend. I'm your host, Shaun Haney of RealAgriculture.com. And of course, we are broadcasting here across the Ralco Radio Network on 650 CKOM and 980 CJME. It is great to be with you here on this weekend, and hope you had yourself a great week. Like I always say, hopefully that you got done the things you needed to get done on that priority list. You set out with that action plan, because spring is fast approaching. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. Some people even out there scratching the ground. Yep, it's here. We're into April, and hard to believe the year is flying by. Q1 over. We're already into Q2, and Q2 brings, we're in fields. Calving is, it's in very much in full swing. Some people even done already, depending on when you partake in that activity. We've got some snow in parts of the province. Some areas looking a lot better than maybe they thought 6 months ago, which is encouraging. But there is still overall a bit of there is concern out there. We're going to definitely need some Mother Nature to definitely cooperate here this season, like always. So, hey, today on RealAg on the Weekend, we're going to have I'm going to talk about getting ready for spring here just in a few seconds. But we're also going to hear today from Lauren Martin. She is Senior Director of Government Relations and Policy with the Canadian Meat Council. That's the organization that represents the meat processors in Canada. They've got some big-time concerns when it comes to some of the changes the federal government's going to be making in terms of access to temporary foreign workers in an effort to solve the housing crisis. I have my opinions on this. I have talked to some farm groups who have sort of said, yeah, we're okay. I think we're going to get an exemption. We're going to be fine. Agriculture's not going to be touched. The processing sector is not under any of those illusions or assumptions, or they have not come to that kind of conclusion. So that's going to be interesting. We're also going to hear today from Paul Bullock. He is looking to set up more weather stations as it relates to some fusarium head blight surveys and assessments. That definitely has an impact in Saskatchewan. Fusarium head blight is a major issue, especially when we're under the right climatic conditions. And then we're going to finish up. I found a really interesting article in the Wall Street Journal, and it's referring to our current pool of young people, I put in air quotes, as being the Toolbelt Generation. And it's very, very interesting. So I'm going to read you some of that article, and we're going to talk about it and sort of dive into it a little bit and have some fun to wrap up this week's show. If you have any feedback on today's program, we'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media channels, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, what else? TikTok, Threads. There's too many. But we're on all of them. So whatever one of choice is yours. You can find us as Real Agriculture. You can also call the RealAg feedback line. The number is 855-776-6147. And the other thing I will tell you is encourage you to go to realagriculture.com, because we have so much content. There is so much happening right now in the world of agriculture. Our content team that is spread out across the country is full metal. Like, we are pedaled down right now trying to cover everything that's happening. Look at just the issue of avian influenza and what's happening in the infections in the dairy herd in the U.S. in certain states. Texas, Ohio, Michigan, Idaho, and others, right? And so that there's the question of not if, but when. From a Canadian perspective, we've been covering this. We got a big cattle sector in our country, but what do we need to do from a biosecurity standpoint? What are the impacts? The impacts on dairy are different than the impacts on beef, potentially. So we've been working on that. So make sure you check out realagriculture.com for some of those stories. And if you want to get our newsletters, go to realagriculture.com/subscribe. Now, I said spring, fast approaching. It's almost here. Some would say it is here. I've seen some Twitter images and videos. People out scratching the ground in all three provinces. Some people putting some seed in certain pockets where they can. Early bird sometimes does get the worm, especially when it comes to some of those cereal crops. This is a good time, though, to sort of do that sort of deep breath reflection, making sure that you're ready, right? Do you have the checklist? Do you got the checklist filled out? Do you got the priorities? The logistics of spring. If you've got a staff, you've got employees that are going to be operating on the farm. Have you gone through the proper training that you can in order to make sure that they've got the skills and the knowledge and they're ready to take on what's in front of them? Because we know this from now until harvest. This is an incredibly busy time, and so putting that pre-work, that proactive work in now is essential to raising the probability that things from an operational standpoint go as smoothly as possible. And I've been talking to farmers on our RealAg radio show on Thursdays. We do the Farmer Rapid Fire, where I talk to farmers across the country, and it's interesting. This time of year, I always ask you, "Hey, you ready for spring?" And there's always a bit of a sort of varied response when it comes to that question, in terms of, "Yeah, I'm ready. Like, I'm ready as I'm going to be." Questions like, "Are you ever really ready?" And some people actually saying, "You know what? Yeah, we're ready. We're ready to go. Like, Mother Nature's got to cooperate. Just got to wait for that soil to be fit, and we're heading out and hitting the field." So it's no different in farming than it is in, say, ranching, where you try to control the things that are in your control. You can't control Mother Nature. You can just be proactive in terms of what you think could be in front of you, or you can, and also have that plan for the reactive side of it too. What happens if all of a sudden it does start raining and we can't get out there? What happens if we do get an early start? Having those plan A, B, and C is really a part of the logistical management of any sort of growing season. So very, very, this is a fun time of year. Okay, let's take a break. When we come back here on RealAg on the Weekend, we're going to talk to Lauren Martin of the Canadian Meat Council. What is going on with the TFW policy, and what does it mean for the meat processing sector? You're listening to RealAg on the Weekend. Of course, we are here on 650 CKOM and 980 CGME.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
There's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup to weed control, field trial results, and the latest yield strategies. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast in your favorite podcast app. Check out the latest Corn School episode today.
Important notice for grain farmers. The Canadian Grain Commission has revoked the licenses of Zegers Seed Incorporated, also known as Zegers Canada. If this company owes you money for grain deliveries, call 1-800-853-6705 immediately. A message from the Government of Canada.
Man, welcome back to RealAg on the Weekend. We've been hearing a lot from the current federal government about the housing crisis, and they've been coming up with schemes and ways to potentially fix the problem, because it's really weighing on Canadians. This is an important topic. The housing crisis is a real thing. Many economists will definitely back up that statement. It's the question of how we fix it and what's creating the problems and what are real solutions. One of the solutions that the federal government has come up with is limiting international students, but another is looking at temporary foreign workers. And agriculture is a big user of temporary foreign workers, and there's some changes coming very abruptly here to how companies can access and how much they'll be able to access temporary foreign workers here in 2024. And one of those impacted very much is the meat processing sector. And joining us to chat about that is Lauren Martin. She is the Senior Director of Government Relations and Policy with the Canadian Meat Council. Lauren, great to chat with you again.
Shaun, always a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a while. So there's lots happening right now when it comes to discussions in Canada from the federal government, and honestly also in the grassroots level too, about immigration. And we've heard a lot out of our current government about changes to how they're going to approach temporary foreign workers going forward. Minister Miller has been, I would say, rather aggressive in some of his use of language when it comes to how he sees industry using TFWs as part of their operations. I got some questions for you about that. The CMC put out a press release earlier this week, clearly not happy. What specifically are you not happy about in the meat processing sector when it comes to some of the government messaging on TFWs?
Well, our news release was reacting to the changes that were announced on March 21st, so just coming up on 2 weeks ago. And those changes were with respect to two aspects. One, and probably the biggest one, the most worrisome one, is that the temporary foreign worker cap was going to be reduced from 30% to 20%. So to break that down a little bit, at this moment, those in the agri-food sector are allowed up to 30% of their labor force to be comprised of temporary foreign workers. That cap has now been reduced to 20%. That's one change, and a big one. The other change is that there is something called a labor market impact assessment, LMIA, labor market impact assessment. That's a requirement in the TFW application process. It used to be valid for 2 years, and now it is only valid for 6 months. So it does require that anyone applying for TFWs has to do that labor market impact assessment at a more frequent rate. And the third change that I would say we were disappointed by was more procedural. These two changes are coming into effect as of May 1st, 2024. So within 6 weeks of that announcement, our member companies have to pivot.
And you could probably speak for the government a little bit here, but just based on your understanding, why the urgency to that change of May 1st?
Speaking frankly, Shaun, I think it was a knee-jerk reaction, and in some of the comments that you would have come across in the media, it was a reaction to the housing crisis. So that's what they're pinning it to. And say, though, that scoping in the agri-food sector is perhaps an overblown response to the housing crisis. And the reason why I think that is because, the measures writ large and all the comments in the media are for reducing the amount of temporary residents that are in the country. Temporary foreign workers only make up 9% of that temporary resident category, and then agri-food is probably even smaller than that. So I don't think that it's going to, I think it's going to have worse impacts or worse outcomes for the agri-food sector.
I guess as we look at this, we got to get an understanding here. How critical are TFWs? Like when you say 30%, we're reducing to 20%, have your member companies been operating at that 30% level and using up all of that utilization?
Some of them have, Shaun. Every single company has different recruiting strategies. Some of them rely on TFWs heavily. Some of them don't. Some of them don't rely on TFWs because of the arbitrary nature of the policies and the cumbersome process to get TFWs here. There's also provincial nomination processes, et cetera, et cetera. So every single company has a different recruiting strategy. But what is by and large absolutely true is that we are in a tight labor market. It's difficult to find Canadians to do these jobs, and often our companies are looking for immigration streams to fill those labor needs.
Lauren, that's been the premise that I think has been a little bit like, okay, we're missing the mark here. And this is, my opinion, is when I hear Minister Miller say that Canadian companies are addicted to the use of TFWs. That to me really reeks of just a misunderstanding on why this program is used and why it's there in the first place. That I think there's a miss there.
I'm not going to disagree with you. You're the one who said it first, but I'm not going to disagree with you that it suggests to me as well a fundamental misunderstanding of the agri-food sector. A labor market impact assessment is you cannot get a TFW without having done the LMIA, and the LMIA needs to demonstrate that there is no Canadian available to do this work. So inherent in applying for a TFW, you have to demonstrate the need. So to use the word like addicted to the process, I mean, it's part of the process to
Okay. Now, I've talked to some farm groups. In particular, I did an interview with OFA, the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, about some of these changes coming when it comes to TFWs and the policies. They don't seem to be concerned whatsoever. They seem to feel, and this has been the word that has been used in the mainstream media a little bit. OFA did not say that they've been told there's an exemption, but they seem to feel that they've been reassured by the government that agriculture will not be touched by this. You seem to have a different opinion representing the processors, even though it is in agricultural processing.
So there are several different ways in which, as I mentioned, companies attract foreign labor. And there is the seasonal agriculture worker program, which normally the primary ag stream goes to first. So I'm not sure if maybe that's the disconnect, but that's conjecture, Shaun. What I will say is that I don't have the same warm and fuzzies that primary agriculture has on the infallibility of this program. The conversations we've had as recently as this morning, the comments that Minister Miller has said in the media, the comments that Prime Minister Trudeau mentioned last week, I'm not left with a lot of comfort as to the protection that they're going to have for the programs.
Okay, so give us the potential scenario here. Right, you're obviously concerned, so you've done some impact analysis here too. If it goes forward as presented, these three changes that you've stated, what's the impact to your member companies?
So I think about the totality when I think about the impact. We know we've just come through the pandemic. We know about the fragility of the food supply chain. We know that our Canadian companies are burdened with regulations. We know that there's a tight labor market. We know as Canadians that there's inflation. This is just one more unhelpful policy in the path to maintaining affordable food prices.
Thank you so much for joining us here today on Real Agriculture, and we look forward to our next chat. I think this isn't the end of this topic, so I'm sure we're going to have lots of opportunity to break it down. Thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you were to ask me personally, I'm a little bit more on the side of concern here with the Canadian Meat Council. I think that there's a lot of need and requirement for temporary foreign workers in agriculture. They serve a very, very key purpose. There is clear reasons why this program exists. I do not think, me personally, again, and I could be proved wrong, but limiting the use of this program does more harm to the industry and to the economy than as any help it provides to the housing crisis. I just don't connect some of those dots, but that's my perception at this point. And I also think that farm groups really need to stay on their toes on this, because I think fundamentally that there's always a misunderstanding of how agriculture and why agriculture uses the TFW program and accesses foreign labor. And some of the messaging from Minister Miller is incredibly inaccurate, incredibly offside from our industry's perspective. So I think we need to keep on hammering on this one and making sure they understand. Because let's be honest, these changes that Lauren just talked about came very much out of left field. They got a lot of they caught a lot of people off guard that this is the path that they were going to go down to such a significant amount. So this is something that I think very much the industry needs to stay on indeed. But you know what? You tell me what you think. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Or, of course, you can call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. And like I said, one of the things that producers push back on, there's nothing cheap about temporary foreign workers. These people are like this. That's one of the other misconceptions that Minister Miller has been talking about and spreading that just is fundamentally not true. You're listening to RealAg on the Weekend here on 650 CKOM and 980 CJME. Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
All right, we go now to Paul Bullock. He's a senior scholar with the Department of Soil Science at the University of Manitoba, and we're talking about fusarium head blight, so that seems a bit strange. Paul, welcome here.
Oh, great to be on, Lindsay.
Okay, we're not really talking about fusarium head blight, the disease, because, of course, that isn't your area of expertise. We are talking about the weather that can impact fusarium head blight and about the weather stations we need to make forecasting maps. So, Paul, catch us up. There's a project underway. What is this project? Who's involved?
Okay, so the project is actually a continuation of some work that was done from 2018 through 2023, and the focus of that research project was to identify the weather factors and develop risk algorithms that would help predict when fusarium head blight would be more or less severe. So this looks at spring wheat, at winter wheat, barley, and durum. Those are the four crops, and those are the types of risks that we were able to develop models for in that project. So this project that we're talking about right now is meant to roll out across Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, to be available publicly, free of charge to anyone who wants to use it. And it's going to actually replace what you find for fusarium risk maps individually in each province. Okay. So Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta have all had fusarium risk maps in the past. Now, these ran on models that were developed in the United States and were kind of imported here. And what we found is that the models that we developed right here in Western Canada worked more accurately than the ones that were imported, which isn't really a big surprise. We kind of expected that would be the case. Mm-hmm. And so this spring, when people go to, say, Saskatchewan's fusarium risk map, they'll still find risk information, but it's going to link up to this new tool that we've developed. And so what we need is weather data to feed those risk algorithms, and then the mapping allows people to see, like if you go there on June the 1st, it'll tell you what the risk was up until the previous day in terms of the weather conditions for creating fusarium.
So, and that's a key part here, is that in order to inform this tool, the forecasting tool, and it be this sort of, almost by the day risk forecasting, you do need to be gathering significant amount of data from multiple points. And that's one of the reasons we're talking today, is that Alberta and Manitoba, for the most part, is covered as far as weather stations, but there's a bit of a gap, pardon the pun, in Saskatchewan as far as these weather stations go. And there's an opportunity potentially, depending on where a farmer is located, that they could have a weather station provided. So tell me about that aspect of this project.
Right. Yeah, that's very important. In Saskatchewan, we just don't have the same number of publicly accessible weather stations. Alberta and Manitoba both have a provincial weather network that is publicly accessible. Saskatchewan has lots of weather stations, but a lot of them are privately held. And so that creates an issue with trying to access those types of data to use in the tool, when it's in private hands. So So this is the opportunity. We've got some weather stations. These are METOS or PESSL, PESSL weather stations. We have 25 of them that we're actually distributing free of charge. We're looking for strategic locations where we could set up one of those stations to fill a large gap in the coverage. So that's the one thing. And yes, there's been people have started to contact me about it. We still have more that we need to do, but that was the first piece of it. But also, there are many people that already have a METOS weather station in Saskatchewan. And all they need to do is to provide permission for us to use their data, and we can assimilate that and use it in the model. And what that does is it provides more points on the map where we can calculate that weather-based risk. And then the map itself just has higher spatial resolution. It's a more accurate depiction of where the risk is higher or lower. So that's the other thing. So you can have existing station owners on the METOS network. METOS has something called Ag Data Transparency Certification. They do not share weather data unless they have specific written permission to do so. And so it's just a matter of reaching out to those people who may have a METOS weather station and asking them. They can contact METOS and say, yeah, we'd be quite willing to let this online mapping tool have access to those data. And that adds another point in Saskatchewan.
Okay, so very important then for producers hearing this that may want to see if they would be eligible for a free station. They can get in touch, but those that already have this particular type certainly could allow their information to be used, that weather information to be used to inform this map as well. So definitely a lot of opportunity to participate here. I've got notes here that says the forecasting map May 15th to August 31st. Is that's when these would be published, or you could access an updated map during that time?
An updated map. That's right. Yeah. So what would happen is that the risk mapping tool, it uses the previous, depending on which model you're talking about, whether it's Dawn or FDK or the fusarium index in the field. It uses weather data from the previous either 10 days or 14 days. And so on May the 15th, it will use the data from May 1st to the 14th, and it will calculate a risk value at every weather station. So that's why, so we want to ingest the weather data from May 1st to August 31st, and then that provides these risk maps during that period from the 15th through to the end of August. Right. So that's the reason for those dates. And when you bring the tool up, that the first thing it does, it defaults to the current day, if that's what you want. Most people, that's what they're going to want. Yeah. You can go back in time too, but the current day is mostly what they will want. What kind of crop do you have? Is it spring wheat? Is it winter wheat? What are you interested in? What variety? Because they have different fusarium resistance levels. And then depending, if you select spring wheat, for example, it'll give you a choice. You can either get a fusarium risk map, what you think it's going to look like in the field, a fusarium head blight index, or you can get an FDK, what you would expect for risk for fusarium damaged kernels. Right. I need to be very clear that this is not going to tell you on the southwest of 23, blah, 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 it's going to be high risk. The grid is 10 by 10 kilometers. So each grid cell, there's an actual risk done for each grid cell, and that's as high as resolution we're going to.
Yeah, still that's pretty good, realistically. I still think that's quite good. Yeah.
Yeah, like when you're standing back and looking at this on a regional basis, it gives you quite a bit of detail about where the hot spots are and that sort of thing. So it does quite well. If you're what we want this to do is to say, wow, I'm sitting in an area that's high risk. I better go and have a look at my field because I may need to put on a fungicide. If you're going to spray, you have to do that around the time of anthesis to be effective, right? Putting a fungicide on 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later when you can already see the fusarium showing up, it's too late. It's not going to do anything. So that's the main purpose for this, is to help better inform fungicide application as a way to help control the level of fusarium when the risk is high. And if the risk isn't high, well then why would you put on a fungicide? It's not going to gain you very much. So that's the whole purpose for this.
And also, I like that it includes that variety choice, because obviously we know there's going to be different risk levels. Most farmers, of course, are going to know that, but it's certainly nice to have that worked into the equation for sure. And the dawn, one thing that I find interesting, of course, is that there is the forecast mapping of that you said in the earlier project that looked at actually dawn development as well, which is, of course, what fusarium creates and makes it, such a detriment for feed. So super cool. Okay, so Paul, before I let you go, we need to connect people. So of course they can contact me and I can put them in touch. But Paul, if someone wants to know if they can perhaps access one of these stations or wants more information, where can they go to find that out? And then where can they actually access this tool?
So let's break it down then. So if you're an existing Metos station owner, you send your station ID and contact information and that to sales@metos.ca, and that information would be enough for them to say, okay, we can get permission and we'll get that data added. If they're interested in one of the free stations, I encourage them to have a look. We've listed the locations that we're looking for, these free weather stations. And if they're near one of those locations, then yes, they can contact me. And that's paul.bullock, BULLOCK, @umanitoba.ca. Yeah, the people have been contacting me. And as I said, we're starting to allocate these stations. So the actual tool itself will be released. We're expecting to release this in May this year, so it's not publicly accessible at this point in time, but we expect it will be accessible to the world in May of 2024.
Okay, it's coming up soon. Month to go.
Yes, it is.
Crunch time.
The push is on. You bet.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Paul. Thank you so much. And of course, anyone out there, if you get in touch with us here at Real Agriculture, we'll connect you as well. So by all means. But Paul, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
All right. Thanks very much, Lindsay.
We'll be right back here with more of RealAg on the weekend as we talk about the Toolbelt Generation. What the heck is that? You're on 650 CKOM and 980 CJME.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by BASF and Syngenta Canada.
Remember the time where we basically were telling all kids, like, if you didn't go to college or didn't go to university, you were somehow a step behind? And there's like this gap now where we don't have enough trades. Well, there's a very interesting article in the Wall Street Journal, and it talks about how Gen Z is becoming the Toolbelt Generation. More young workers are going into trades as disenchantment with the college track continues, and rising pay and new technologies shine up plumbing and electrical jobs. I also think this is an opportunity for agriculture. Okay? If we see a trend where people are moving into more tangible, hands-on kind of positions, This is an opportunity for agriculture because we very much fit into these same skill sets. So the journal talks about how America needs more plumbers, and Gen Z is answering the call. Long beset by a labor crunch, the skilled trades are newly appealing to the youngest cohort of American workers, many of whom are choosing to leave the college path, I should say. Rising pay and new technologies in fields from welding to machine tooling are giving trade professions a facelift, helping them shed the image of being dirty, low-end work. Growing skepticism about the return on a college education, the cost of which has soared in recent decades, is adding to their shine. Enrollment in vocational training programs is surging, as overall enrollment in community colleges and four-year institutions has fallen. The number of students enrolled in vocational-focused community colleges rose 16% last year to its highest level since the National Student Clearinghouse began tracking such data in 2018. The ranks of students studying construction trades rose 23% during that time, while those in programs covering HVAC and vehicle maintenance and repairs increased by 7%. Do you see what I mean about how this is really potentially a real opportunity for the industry of agriculture to maybe close some of the labor gap that we have had? Because the same kids that have an interest and some of the skills and the aptitude to be in some of these more Toolbelt Toolbelt kind of jobs, as the article talks about, are exactly what we're trying to attract on the farm. Now, one of the things you may be asking yourself is, what about the money side of it? So what the journal says is the median pay for a new construction hire rose 5.1% to $48,089 last year. By contrast, new hires in professional services earned an annual of $39,520, up 2.7% from 2022, according to the data from payroll services provided by ADP. That's the fourth year that median annual pay for new construction hires has eclipsed earnings for new hires in both professional services and information sectors, such as accountants or IT maintenance workers, according to ADP. Demand for trade apprenticeships, which let students combine work experience with a course of study, often paid for by employers, has boomed lately. In a survey of high school and college-age people by software company Jobber last year, 75% said they would be interested in vocational schools offering paid on-the-job training. The rise of generative AI is changing the career calculus for some young people. The majority of respondents Jobber surveyed said they thought blue-collar jobs offered better job security than white-collar ones, given the growth of AI. Fascinating. I really do think this is very, very fascinating. What a switch. It is a flip. The question, so one, good for trade schools, right? Good for community college. I have not seen the Canadian data to this, but this is an example where I feel, my guess is that this is somewhat of a similar bent in Canada. Now, if somebody has some data to say differently, that's please send it my direction. I would really, really love to see it. But I will repeat again, this is potentially a major opportunity for the agricultural sector to grab onto this wave, as we are also incredibly short of people to work in our industry. We'd love your feedback on that. Does Gen Z potentially becoming a tool belt generation? Is that an opportunity for agriculture? Do you think the students are smart to see this as the opportunity that blue-collar jobs will defend better against the implementation of AI than white-collar jobs? I don't know. I probably could argue both sides of that. Send me your feedback, shaney@realagriculture.com. Or, of course, you can always call the RealAg feedback line. The number is 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for listening to RealAg on the Weekend. Don't forget to check out realagriculture.com. And you've been listening to RealAg on the Weekend here on 650 CKOM and 980 CJME.